Karina baby, for September the 11th, we have Imogen Claire. Imogen Claire hasn't a care. She will not brush or comb her hair, or wash her face or blow her nose, but we suppose that as she grows, she will get better. There she is. She is refusing to do all kinds of things. This is a delightful story from the pen of Rudyard Kipling, one of the elephant's great writers. One of England's great writers. This clever and imaginative yarn about how the elephant has got his trunk is from Kipling's book, Just So Stories. The Elephant's Child is set in Africa, but many of Kipling's novels, poems, and stories are set in India, where he was born and lived for a number of years. His other collections of stories from young people include The Jungle Book and The Second Jungle Book. Rudyard Kipling. The Elephant's Child. In the high and far-off times, the elephant, oh best beloved, had no trunk. He had only a blackish, bugly nose, and as big as a boot, that he could wiggle about from side to side, but he couldn't pick things up. But there was one elephant, a new elephant, an elephant's child, that was full of sustainable curiosity. And that means he asked ever so many questions and lived in Africa. And he filled all Africa with his sustainable curiosity. He asked his tall aunt, the ostrich, why her tail feathers grew just so, and his tall aunt, the ostrich, spanked him with her hard claw. He asked his tall Uncle Giraffe what made his skin spotty, and his tall uncle, the giraffe, spanked him with his hard hoof. And still, he was just as sustainable. Curiosity. He asked his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, why her eyes were red, and his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, spanked him with her broad hoof. And he asked his hairy uncle, the baboon, why melons tasted just so, and his hairy uncle, the baboon, spanked him with his hairy paw. And still he was full of sustainable curiosity. He asked questions about everything that he saw, or heard, or felt, or smelt, or touched, and all his uncles and all of his aunts spanked him. And still he was full of sustainable curiosity. One fine morning in the middle of the Parisian of equinox, this sustainable elephant child asked a new fine question that he had never asked before. He asked, what does the crocodile have for dinner? Then everybody said, hush, in a loud and dreadful tone. And they spanked him immediately and directly, without stopping for a long time. By and by, when that was finished, he came upon Coca-Cola bird sitting in the middle of a what-a-bee thrush bush. And he said, my father has spanked me, my mother has spanked me, all my aunts and uncles have spanked me for my sustainable curiosity, and still I want to know what the crocodile has for dinner. The Coca-Cola bird said, what a mournful cry. Go to the banks of the great green, grassy Limpopo river, all set about with fever trees, and find out. The very next morning, when there was nothing left for the equinoxes, because the Parisians had proceeded according to presentient, this sustainable elephant's child took 100 pounds of bananas and a little short red kind, and 100 pounds of sugar cane, the long purple kind, and 17 melons, the greeny craky kind, and said to his dear family, "Goodbye, I am going to the great green grassy Limpopo River," all set about with fever trees to find out what the crocodile has for dinner, and they all spanked him once more for luck, though he asked them most politely to stop. Then he went away a little warm, but not at all astonished, eating melons and throwing the rinds about, because he could not pick it up. He went from Grahamstown to Kimberley, and from Kimberley to Coaham County. In Coaham County he went east by north, eating melons all the time, till at last he came to the banks of the great green grassy Limpopo River, and sat about with fever trees, precisely as Coco Kelly Bird had said. Now you must know and understand, O best beloved, that till that very week and day and hour and minute the sustainable elephant child has never seen a crocodile and did not know what one was like. It was all his sustainable curiosity. At first thing that he found was bicolored python, rock snakes curled round a rock. "Excuse me," said the elephant child most politely, "because have you seen such a thing as a crocodile in these promiscuous parts?" "Have I seen a crocodile?" said the bicolored python rock snakes in a voice so dreadful scorn. "What will you ask me next?" "Excuse me," said the elephant child, "but could you kindly tell me what he has for dinner?" Then the bicolored python rock snake uncoiled himself very quickly from the rock and spanked the elephant child with his scalesome, flesome tail. "That is odd," said the elephant child, "because my father, my mother, my uncles, and my aunts, not to mention my other aunts, the hippopotamus, and the other uncle, the baboon, and all have spanked me for the sustainable curiosity, and I suppose this is the same thing." So he got spanked once again. So he said goodbye very politely to the bicolored python rock snake and helped to coil him up in the rock again, and went on, a little warm, but not at all astonished, eating melons and throwing the rinds about because he could not pick it up, till he trod on what he thought was a log and wood at the very edge of the green grassy Limpopo River, all set about with the fever trees. But it was really the crocodile. Oh, best beloved, and the crocodile winked one eye like this. "Excuse me," said the elephant child most politely, "but have you seen a crocodile in these promiscuous parts?" Then the crocodile winked the other eye and lifted his tail out of the mud, and the elephant child stepped back most politely because he did not wish to be spanked again. "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile. "Why do you ask such things?" "Excuse me," said the elephant child most politely, "but my father has spanked me, my mother has spanked me, not to mention all my tall aunts, the ostrich, and my tall uncle giraffe, who can kick ever so hard, as well as my broad aunt the hippopotamus, and my hairy uncle the baboon, and including the bicolored python rock snake with the scalesome, flimsome tail, just up the bank, who spanks harder than any of them. And so it is quite all the same to you. I don't want to be spanked any more. Come hither, little one," said the crocodile, "for I am a crocodile." And he whipped crocodile tears to show it was quite true. Then the elephant child grew all breathless, and padded and kneeled down to the bank and said, "You are the very person I have been looking for all these long days. Will you please tell me what you have for dinner?" "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile, "and I'll whisper. Then the elephant child put his head down close to the crocodile tusks, mouth, and the crocodile caught him by his little nose, which up it to that very week, day, hour, and minute, had been no longer than a boot. Though much more useful, I think, said the crocodile, as he said in between his teeth, like this, I think today I will begin with elephant's child. So the crocodile is going to eat the elephant's child for dinner. Ooh. At this, O best beloved, the elephant was much annoyed, and he said, speaking through his nose, like this, let go, you are horridly be. Then the bi-colored python rock snake sniffed down from the bank and said, my young friend, if you do not now immediately and instantly pull as hard as ever you could, in my opinion, that your acquaintance in the large pattern leathered Onsham, by this he meant the crocodile, will jerk you into the yonder limpid stream, before you can say Jack Robinson. This is the bi-colored python rock snake, always talking. Then the elephant child sat back on his little husks and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose began to stretch. And the crocodile fluttered into the water, making it all creamy with great sweeps of his tail. And he pulled and he pulled and he pulled, and the elephant child's nose kept on stretching, and the elephant child spread all the little four legs, and he pulled and he pulled and he pulled, and his nose kept on stretching, and the crocodile threshed his tail like an oar, and he pulled and pulled and pulled, and at each pull the elephant child's nose grew longer and longer, and it hurt him. Aegis. Then the elephant child felt his legs slipping, and he said through his nose, which was now nearly 5 feet long, this is too much for me. Then the tri-colored python rock snake came down from the bank and knotted himself in a double clove hitch round the elephant child's hind legs and said, Rush, an inexperienced traveler, we will now surgically devote ourselves to the little high tension, because if we do not, in my impression, that yonder self-propelling man of water with the armor pitted under deck, and by this, oh best beloved, he meant the crocodile, will permanently venture your future career. That is the way all bi-colored python snakes always talk. Here he is. So he pulled, and the elephant pulled, and the crocodile pulled, and the elephant child and the bi-colored python rock snake pulled hardest, and at last the crocodile let go of the elephant child's nose, and with a plop that you could hear all up and down the Limpopo, then the elephant child sat down most hard and sudden, but first he was careful to say thank you to the bi-colored python rock snake, and next he was kind to his poor pulled nose, and wrapped it up in a cool banana leaf, and hung it in a green-gray, grassy Limpopo to cool. What are you doing that for? Said the bi-colored python rock snake. Excuse me, said the elephant child, but my nose is badly out of shape, and I am waiting for it to shrink. Then you will have to wait a long time, said the bi-colored python rock snake. Some people do not know what is good for them. The elephant child sat there for 3 days waiting for his nose to shrink, but it never grew any shorter. And besides, it made himself squint. For, oh, best beloved, you will see and understand that the crocodile had pulled it into a really trunky trunk, same as the elephants have today. At the end of the 3rd day, a fly came and stung him on the shoulder, and before you knew what he was doing, he lifted up his trunk and hit the fly dead. with that end of it. Vintage number 1, so the bicolor python rock snake. You should have done that with the mearsome nose. Try and eat a little now. Before he thought what he was doing, the elephant child put out his trunk and pulled a large bunch of grass, dusted in clean against his forelegs, and stuffed it into his own mouth. Vintage number 2, so the bicolor python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with the smear nose. Don't you think the sun is very hot here? It is, said the elephant child, and before he thought what he was doing, he scrappled up the scrapes of mud from the banks of the green-gray, greasy Limpopo and slicked it on his head, where it made a cool, slappery, splishy mud cap and tightly behind his ears. Vantage number 3, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with the smear nose. Now how do you feel about being spanked again? Excuse me, said the elephant child, but I should not like it at all. How would you like to spank somebody? Said the bicolored python rock snake. I should like it very much indeed, said the elephant child. Well, said the bicolored python rock snake, you will find that the new nose of yours is very useful to spank people with. Thank you, said the elephant child. I'll remember that, and now I think I'll go home. Go home to all my dear family and try. There he goes. So the elephant child went home across Africa, frisking and whisking his trunk. Then he wanted fruit, he'd eat them and he'd pull them down from the tree instead of waiting for it to fall, as he used to do. When he wanted grass, he plucked grass up from the ground instead of getting on his knees, as he used to do. When the flies bit him, he broke off the branch of a tree and used it as a fly whisk. And he made himself a new cool, squishy, squashy mud cap whenever the sun was hot. When he felt lonely walking in the Africa, he sang to himself down his trunk, and the nose was louder and several brass bands. He went especially out of his way to find a broad hippopotamus. She was no relation of his, and he spanked her very hard to make sure that the bicolored python rock snake had spoken the truth about his new trunk. The rest of the time he picked up the melon rinds that had dropped out on his way to Limpopo, for he was a tidy pachyderm. One dark evening he came back to all his dear families, and he coiled up his trunk and said, "How do you do?" They were very glad to see him and immediately said, "Come here and be spanked. Now for your sustainable curiosity." "Pooh," said the elephant child. "I don't think you people know anything about spanking, but I do, and I'll show you." Then he uncoiled his trunk and knocked two of his dear brothers head over heels. "Oh, bananas," they said, "where did you learn that trick, and what have you done to your nose?" "I got a new one from the crocodile, and on the banks of the great gray green grassy Limpopo River," said the elephant child. "I asked him what he had for dinner, and he gave me this to keep." "It looks very ugly," said his hairy uncle the baboon. "It does," said the elephant's child, "but it's very useful." And he picked up his hairy uncle the baboon by one hairy leg and hooked him over the hornet's nest. Then the bad elephant child spanked all his dear families for a long time, till they were all warm and greatly astonished. He pulled out his tall ostrich aunt's tail feathers, and he caught his tall uncle, the giraffe, by his hind leg, and dragged him through the thorn bush. And he shouted at his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, and blew bubbles into her ears when she was sleeping in the water after meals, but he never let anyone touch Bird. At last things grew so excited that his dear families went off one by one in a hurry to the banks of the great gray green grassy Limpopo River, and all set about with fever trees and borrowed new noses from the crocodile. When they came back, nobody spanked anybody anymore, and ever since that day, oh, best beloved, all the elephants you will ever see, besides all those that you won't have trunks previously, like the trunk of the Sustainable Elephant Child's. I kept 6 honest, 7 serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what and why and when, and how and where and who. I sent them. Okay, and so the Sustainable Elephant Child. Let's start this one over. So I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what and why, when and how and where and who. I send them over land and sea. I send them east and west. But after they have worked for me, I give them all a rest. I let them rest from 9 till 5, for I am busy then, as well as breakfast, lunch, and tea, for they are hungry men. But different folk have different views. I know a person small. She keeps 10 million serving men, who get no rest at all. She sends them abroad on her own affairs. From the second she opens her eyes, 1 million hows, 2 million wares, and 7 millions wise. That no one's thanked anyone at all anymore. And they will all want to know what, why, when, how, where, and who. They're all good questions to know. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? When are you doing it? How are you doing it? Where are you doing it? Who are you doing it with, right? What, why, when, how, where, and who. Curiosity is always a good thing. I remember when you started asking me so many questions. How does this work? Why does this work? Where does this work? When does this work? And I always loved your curiosity. So I was always, let's read a book about this. Let's go find information about this. Let's look this up on Google. This is why this works. This is where this works. This is when this works. This is how this works. This is who this works for. And I love your curiosity because it teaches you so much about the world around you. If you're not curious about the world around you, you kind of stop having that flair of, well, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen now? What's going to happen then? Like, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. It's a good thing to ask questions and to be curious about your situation, circumstances, everything. Never give up. No matter what, you always keep moving forward. You always have dreams and goals of things that you actually want to do and achieve. I love you and I miss you so much. And always be realistic though too. You can have this plan of like this house you want to design and it's over the top, right? And it's just everything you've ever dreamed of. You can have this idea of a landscape that you want. You can have an idea of the career that you want. You can have an idea of the things that you want, but always be realistic about it too. Our timelines are short. They're not very long. So it's good to be like, well, how can I achieve my goal and be the most content even if it's not the most thrilling? It's okay to just be content in your situation. You don't have to row your boat upstream ever. Let's do we sit and watch the rain as it falls from the sky. And we are glad to be inside where it is warm and dry. Oh yes, I do love the rain. It keeps the earth so clean and helps the pretty flowers grow from the mountains to the streams. Rudyard Kipling is one of my favorite artists. You could walk in crowds and still not lose your common touch. If you could talk with kings and still not lose your virtue. If you let all men count with you, but none too much, right? If you let no foe or loving friend hurt you. Yours is the world and everything that is in it. I love that poem. Honey, I miss you, and I love you, and I can't wait to see you. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're content within yourself. I hope that you are doing all the things you want to do. I love you, and I miss you.